Between the ages of 16 and 20, I was battling severe anxiety-related insomnia. It wasn't just trouble falling asleep, it was a constant, gnawing dread that made rest feel impossible. My mind would race, sometimes for days on end, and at its worst, I began to hallucinate from sheer exhaustion. My therapist finally prescribed me sleeping pills. They were strong, and when I took them, I would knock out for a solid 9 hours. No dreams, no interruptions. For once, I felt relief until I forgot to take them one night. It was rare for me to fall asleep without the pills, but on this particular night, I managed to drift off anyway. The sleep didn't last long though. I woke up after maybe 2 hours, completely alert, my body convinced that it had had enough rest. I knew what would happen next, the endless tossing and turning, the rising frustration, and that creeping sense of being trapped in my own mind. Going back to sleep without the meds was almost impossible. I lay in bed for a while, staring into the dark. The familiar sounds of the owls filled the silence, creaks in the walls, the hum of the fridge, the occasional settling of the floorboards. It was comforting in a way, these normal middle-of-the-night noises. But as I lay there, something started to feel off. A subtle shift in the air. It was as if the room had grown heavier, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt an overwhelming sense that I wasn't alone. I've had anxiety long enough to recognize when my mind is playing tricks on me, so I tried to rationalize the feeling. My mom was staying at her boyfriend's house that night, so I knew I was home alone. I hadn't heard any sounds out of the ordinary that would suggest someone had broken in. Still, the sensation lingered, creeping under my skin like a cold draft. My heart started to race, thudding in my chest like it knew something I didn't. Then I saw it, or thought I saw it. A white face, barely visible, hovering just above me in the darkness. I froze, a jolt of fear shooting through me, my breath catching in my throat. For a moment, all I could do was stare at that pale, ghostly face. It was only inches from my own, and I could feel its presence, something sinister, something watching me. Panic kicked in, and in a blind, instinctive reaction, I lashed out, swiping at the air and screaming, "Go away!" Suddenly, the door to my room flew open with a loud slam, and I heard rapid footsteps pounding down the stairs. I shot upright, heart hammering in my chest. My room was still pitch black, the air still thick with tension, but now the owls had fallen completely silent again. My rational mind tried to catch up with what had just happened. Was it a dream? Was I hallucinating again? My eyes darted to the door, now closed again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there. That something, or someone, had actually run out of my room. My heart still racing, I decided I couldn't just sit there. I forced myself out of bed and tiptoed to the door. Slowly, cautiously, I cracked it open, my ears straining for any sound. "Hello?" I called out into the dark hallway. No response. Just silence. Fear clawed at me, and I knew I wasn't brave enough to go downstairs to investigate. My phone was charging in the living room, a habit I developed when I was trying to break the insomnia on my own, hoping to remove all distractions from my bedroom. Now, it meant I was trapped upstairs, with no way to call for help. I scanned my room, and my eyes landed on the heavy bookcase against the far wall. It was big, solid wood, and my only option. I shoved it in front of my door, wincing at the loud scrape of wood against the floor, but once it was there, I felt a tiny bit safer. It wouldn't stop anyone determined to get in, but it might slow them down. My mind raced as I considered my options. The window. I glanced at it, it led out onto the roof. If I really had to, I could climb out and make my way to the neighbor's house, though I wasn't thrilled about the idea of balancing on the roof in the middle of the night. I sat on my bed, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the door. Hours passed in a tense, unbearable silence. I listened for every creak, every shift in the house, convinced that at any moment I'd hear footsteps on the stairs or the soft creak of the door opening. But nothing happened. As dawn began to break, bathing the room in soft light, the fear slowly began to ebb away. I started to convince myself that it had been some kind of vivid nightmare, maybe triggered by my anxiety or lack of medication. Finally, around 7 a.m., I felt brave enough to move the bookcase and open the door. The hallway was empty, as it had been when I called out earlier, but now it felt less threatening in the daylight. I ran downstairs, heart still racing, and grabbed my phone from the living room. I called my mom, still shaken, and asked her to come home as soon as possible. She was annoyed at being woken up so early but promised she'd be back in about an hour. I stayed in the living room, trying to calm myself down by watching TV, but time seemed to crawl by. After what felt like forever, I heard the front door open, followed by a scream. I ran to the hallway to find my mom, standing pale and wide-eyed, her hands trembling. She pointed to the front door. There was a man, she stammered, standing right behind the door. As soon as I opened it, he just bolted past me. He was tall, thin, he looked like a skeleton. He had this wild hair and a long beard. I felt my blood run cold. He had been there. All that time, standing in the hallway, just waiting for the right moment to escape. I hadn't heard him move at all after that initial slam of the door. I had walked right past him when I'd gone downstairs earlier, completely oblivious. We called the police, and when they arrived, they searched the house. No signs of forced entry. But what they did find made my skin crawl. In my bedroom, there was a crawl space I had never used, a small door in the wall that I never even thought to open. The police discovered that it could be accessed from the other side of the wall as well. Inside, they found old clothes of mine, things I'd lost and assumed had been misplaced, and notes detailing my routines, when I took my meds, how long it would take for me to fall asleep. There were pictures, too. Some of me sleeping. Others of me awake, taken from odd angles, like from corners of the room. But the most disturbing ones were those of me in the bathroom, in the hallway, walking around at night. He had been watching me, following me, for who knows how long. Years of therapy helped me eventually sleep without medication, and I've since moved in with my boyfriend, far away from the house. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there. They never caught him. Every time I go to bed, I check every closet, every crawl space, every shadow. Because I know he's still out there somewhere, and that terrifies me.